Maya Bennett stood alone in the silence of the ink and steam, her bookstore café that had taken nearly a decade to build. On the worn wooden table in front of her lay the eviction notice from the bank, the print crisp and final, like the last nail in the coffin of a dream she had nurtured all her life. The shelves remained full, but the people were gone. The scent of espresso had faded, and the warm hum of community had been replaced by hollow stillness. At 38, Maya was no longer a dreamer who believed passion alone could pay the bills. She had endured loss, especially the sudden passing of her father, who once helped her arrange every book, pour every cup of coffee, and who believed wholeheartedly that the ink and steam would be a sanctuary for weary souls. But now, everything was crumbling before her, no matter how much heart she had poured into it. She had tried everything: restructuring loans, filing for tax extensions, hosting community readings, even selling her rarest first editions. But nothing worked. The landlord had run out of patience, the bank wouldn't wait, and investors didn't care about nostalgia-laced bookshelves or stories shared over cinnamon lattes. They only cared about numbers. Her eyes drifted to an old photo behind the counter. It showed 10-year-old Maya perched on her father's lap, both of them beaming in front of the shop on opening day. Everything in that image felt untouched by time, pure, hopeful, sacred. Looking at it now made her chest ache, as if time itself were mocking her. "I really did try," she whispered, her voice cracking into the silence. She moved toward the window and looked out. A light winter drizzle blurred the streetlights outside, turning the sidewalk into a hazy wash of gold and gray. The city moved on, as it always did. But for Maya, time had stopped. There were no customers, no future, no miracle left to save the thing she had loved with all her heart. 3 days later, Maya returned to the commercial building where the auction was being held for what remained of the ink and steam. The wind whipped around her as she stepped inside, each footfall heavy, as if she were attending the funeral of her own dream. Every item was tagged with a price: the espresso machine, the wooden bookshelves, the velvet chairs. Each one a memory torn from her life and offered up for pennies. She stood at the back of the crowded room, trying to hide the sting in her eyes. The auction began. The coordinator's voice rang out in a cold, detached rhythm. Every shelf, every teacup, even the weathered sign from above her door. One by one, they were announced, evaluated, bid on, and sold. Maya's heart fractured with every gavel drop. Then she saw him. A tall man in a charcoal wool coat stood against the far wall, silent. His eyes were fixed on her, not with judgment or curiosity, just quiet attention. He didn't look like a bargain hunter or a scavenger. He stood there like he'd been waiting. When the auction ended, Maya stepped outside, desperate for air. She didn't expect him to follow. "Are you Maya Bennett?" She nodded cautiously. "Who are you?" "My name is Julian Carter." He handed her a sleek business card, CEO of Carter and Rowe Publishing. The name rang a bell. She'd seen it in industry magazines, a powerful figure, often associated with influence and silence. "I don't understand why someone like you would know about my little bookstore," she said wearily. "Because I care about places like that," Julian said simply. "But I also know you're in serious trouble." She said nothing. No one liked having their failures spoken aloud, especially not by a stranger. "I can help," he continued calmly. "I'll pay off everything. The back taxes, overdue rent, your credit lines, all of it." Maya stared at him, a storm brewing in her chest. Part of her wanted to believe in miracles. Another part screamed this was a velvet-wrapped trap. "And what do you want in return?" she asked, though a part of her already knew it wouldn't come free. Julian paused for a long moment. Then, without flinching, "1 night with you? And a chance for you to carry my child?" The words hit her like a slap. She took a step back. "You're serious, completely. You're insane." "Maybe," Julian replied, his gaze steady. "But I'm not forcing anything. It's an offer, and you're free to walk away." Maya's face burned. Humiliation, shock, a flicker of terrible curiosity. She had received propositions before, crude, demeaning, but no one had ever laid out her future like a contract and asked for this. Julian held out his card again. If you consider it, call me, but decide soon. The bank won't wait. She stood frozen as he turned and disappeared down the gray city street, her mind ringing with a storm of questions and the sound of wind howling through the gaps. For the next 3 days, Maya could barely eat or sleep. It felt like a storm had taken up residence inside her. She picked up Julian's business card over and over, only to set it down again. A small slip of paper, but it weighed on her like stone. She had spent her whole life believing in integrity, in hard work, dignity, self-respect. Her father had taught her, when you let others decide your worth, you've already surrendered your power. But if he were still alive, would he have chosen to let her lose everything? She called her attorney. The answer didn't help much. Legally, there's nothing wrong with it, he said hesitantly. As long as both parties consent, it's a civil agreement. But morally, it's a compromise, Maya interrupted, staring at nothing. And I don't know if I can live with it. That night, she sat for hours by her apartment window, watching the quiet street below. In her mind were images of the café, the scent of old pages, the slight burn of espresso, the hum of familiar voices. It was all about to disappear, and she was powerless to stop it. On one side, her dignity. On the other, her dream. Neither was light. The next morning, she woke with dark circles under her eyes. No makeup, no pretending to be strong. She picked up the phone and dialed the number printed on that business card that had haunted her for days. It rang twice. Julian Carter, his voice came, low and calm, just like she remembered. It's me, Maya, she said softly. I need to talk. That afternoon, they met at a small cafe near the river. Unlike the imposing figure she had imagined, Julian chose a corner table away from the crowd. He brought no paperwork. He didn't try to convince her. He just listened. If I say yes, Maya began, her voice rough from sleepless nights, I have conditions. Julian nodded. Say them. First, I won't be hidden away like I'm something shameful. Second, if I do get pregnant, I'm not just a cage to carry your child. I'm a human being. You'll have my full respect, Julian replied, his voice steady. I won't treat you like a vessel. And if this happens, I'll make sure you're never left alone. Maya leaned back in her seat, still uneasy, but when she looked into Julian's eyes, what unsettled her wasn't coldness. It was something that looked a little like hurt. She didn't believe him fully, but she knew what she was about to do couldn't be undone. Maya arrived at Julian's apartment at the agreed time. She wore a navy-blue dress, simple but elegant, her hair tucked behind her ear to hide the slight tremble in her hands. The door opened almost immediately after she rang the bell. Julian stood there in a rolled-up gray shirt, serious but not cold. Good evening, he said, with a quiet nod. Hi, she replied, steadying her voice. His penthouse overlooked the river, with floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed the space in soft golden light. It was warm, yet impersonal, like everything had been curated to impress but not to comfort. Maya stepped in, her heart a whirl of contradiction. She knew what she was doing. Her emotions hadn't caught up. Would you like something to drink? Julian asked, gesturing toward the bar. Just water, Maya replied. He nodded, poured her a glass, and they both sat on the large sofa by the window. Outside, the river shimmered with city lights. Inside, only the soft hum of breath filled the silence between two people about to share something enormous, despite barely knowing each other. Can I ask you something? Maya said, after a long pause. Of course. Why me? Julian looked at her for a long time. Because you're unlike anyone I've ever met. You don't try to control everything. You live for something that matters, and maybe I want my child to grow up with that. His answer caught her off guard. She had expected something clinical, bloodlines, inheritance, legacy. But what he said, however vague, felt strangely sincere. After a light dinner, salad and mushroom soup Julian had made himself, he took her out to the balcony. The air between them wasn't tense like a business arrangement. It was uncertain, searching, even a little tender. Back inside, Maya slipped off her heels and stepped barefoot onto the soft rug. Julian stood a few feet away, watching her, quietly, not hungrily. No one spoke. She moved toward him, feeling the pulse in her chest rise. He didn't reach for her. He didn't take her hand. He simply said, "If you change your mind, I won't blame you." And somehow, that freedom was what made her stay. They didn't love each other. There were no promises. But when their lips met, it wasn't a transaction. It was two lonely people, too far in to turn back, looking for something to hold on to in a long night. The room glowed with warm light, not rushed, not forced. Every touch, every breath was cautious, like they were both asking, "Is this real?" Could it be that somehow this wasn't just a deal? Julian was gentler than she expected, not out of pity but out of quiet understanding. Maya felt it in the way he placed a hand on her back, not possessive, just present. In his eyes, she didn't see a contract being fulfilled, but someone trying to hear her without words. Later, Maya lay on her side, facing the stars now blurred by city lights. Julian lay beside her, not touching, not distant. The space between them wasn't empty, it was waiting. Maya didn't know if she felt relief, regret, or fear. But one thing was certain. What had just happened could never be called just a contract. After that night, Maya thought she wouldn't be able to face Julian again. She imagined shame, distance, and the hollowness of something nameless would drive her away for good. But the opposite happened. Julian called her on the third morning after. He didn't mention the past, didn't bring up results or ask for any tests. He simply asked, gently, "Would you like to have dinner?" A question so casual, it felt like nothing had ever happened. Maya hesitated, then said yes. They met at a small French-style restaurant tucked in a quiet alley, not Julian's usual scene, but clearly chosen for its privacy. During dinner, they didn't talk about the contract or that night. Instead, they spoke about books, old cafes in Florence, and how time reshapes people without them realizing it. Julian didn't rush, he listened, with eyes that paid attention. And that scared her more than anything, because the more they met, the more Maya felt like she was drifting into something undefined, no longer a transaction, but not yet something she could call love. Each meeting felt like a cautious step on a suspended bridge, fragile, thrilling. Julian started showing up at the Ink and Steam. No appointments, no entourage, just him, walking in during late afternoons, taking a seat in the corner, ordering espresso, and reading, as if he were just another regular. "You don't have to do this," Maya once said, watching him wipe down a dusty shelf. "I know," Julian replied, "but I want to be here." That simple answer silenced her for the rest of the afternoon. Sometimes he helped her make coffee, cleared tables, even carried boxes of books. And Maya, though uncertain, couldn't deny something was shifting. The space between them felt lighter, no longer loaded with conditions or tension, just presence, just being. And yet, a thorn of doubt remained buried under her skin. Every time Julian smiled, she wondered, is this real or just part of a well-pucked act? When he touched her shoulder, she flinched, not from fear, but from confusion. Was this affection or control? Maya had lived too long expecting to be used. And now, when something good stood before her, she didn't know how to trust it. One evening, as Julian was getting ready to leave, Maya called out. "Julian," she said from behind the counter, drying the last glass. "If I can't give you the answers you want, if I can't be sure about anything, what would you do?" Julian paused. His eyes met hers, without demand, without disappointment. "I'll wait," he said, as long as you're still here." That one sentence, simple, without promise, but honest, made Maya feel, for the first time in years, like maybe her heart wanted to believe in something again. Everything began to shift on a gray December afternoon. Maya had just locked up the ink and steam after a long day when she noticed a woman standing across the street. She wore a beige coat, her posture flawless, her face striking with perfectly pinned blonde hair. The woman crossed the street confidently, eyes fixed on Maya. "You're Maya Bennett?" she asked, her voice low and razor-sharp. "Yes, can I help you?" Maya replied, wary. "I'm Vanessa Carter, Julian's ex-wife." Maya's heart missed a beat. "We need to talk," Vanessa said, not waiting for an invitation. She stepped into the shop like she belonged there, scanning the bookshelves before seating herself by the window. Maya hesitated, then followed her in. "I'll get straight to the point," Vanessa began, placing her purse on the table. "I know you're involved in an arrangement with Julian. I was the woman he needed once, for a time, and I think you should know a few things before you go any further." Maya clenched the edge of her coat. "I don't think this is any of your business." "You're entitled to think that, but hear me out. Julian has never wanted children. Ever. What he told you? It's a move, a tactic. He's under pressure from his father to prove he's finally grown up. You're part of that display. You don't know me, or what we are," Maya replied softly but firmly. Vanessa shrugged. "I know Julian. I know how he uses people like chess pieces. He can be sincere, gentle, patient. It's all part of the performance, but when it's done, he moves on. He always does." "Thank you for your concern," Maya said, rising, trying to stay composed, "but I think we're done here." Vanessa stood too, a thin smile on her lips. "Just a reminder, you're in a game where you don't even know the rules, and Julian, he always wins." As Vanessa left, Maya remained frozen in the shop. The doorbell's chime echoed longer than usual, like it didn't want her to forget. She tried to push the words aside, but they looped through her mind like a haunting refrain. That night, sleep eluded her. Doubt began to creep in. Were all those gentle moments just well-played scenes? Was it strategy, not sincerity? For the first time in weeks, Maya felt small again. And more dangerously, she realized she had started to want to believe in Julian. That morning, Maya entered the cafe with a feeling she couldn't quite name. She wasn't angry anymore, but she didn't trust either. Vanessa's words played on repeat in her head like a scratched record. He'll walk away and return to his untangled life. Julian arrived at 9 a.m. as usual, carrying 2 cappuccinos and a small pastry bag. He smiled when he saw her, but that smile no longer warmed Maya's heart. It felt distant. "I got the kind of pastry you like," Julian said, setting the bag on the counter. "Thank you," Maya replied softly. "Is something wrong?" he asked, tilting his head. Maya looked him straight in the eye. "Yes, we need to talk." Julian nodded, not avoiding. They sat by the window, where morning light angled through the foggy glass. Maya rested her hand on the table, eyes lowered. "I met Vanessa," she began. "She came here, uninvited, and she had a lot to say." Julian said nothing. No surprise, no defense, just quiet waiting. She said, "You never wanted children, that all of this is a performance, that I'm just a part of your image play." Julian exhaled, low. "And you believe her?" "I don't know," Maya replied, her voice trembling. "That's the problem. I don't know what to believe. Whether to trust your care, whether to believe something that began with a contract could turn into something real, or whether I'm just a role in a story you've written." "I've never been acting," Julian said slowly. "I don't know how to prove it, but everything I've done has been real. You make me want to stay, to change." "But I can't know that," Maya shook her head, eyes glassy. "Every time I start to believe, something pulls me back. You're too perfect, too ready. I don't know if that's sincerity or control. Silence fell like weight. The ticking clock and the distant city noise were all that remained. At last, Maya stood. "I can't keep doing this," she said. "I can't live between hope and fear. I can't give parts of myself not knowing if they'll be held with care." Julian didn't stop her. He just looked at her, long and deeply, as if memorizing every detail of her face. "I understand," he said quietly. "If you need to go, I won't stop you." Maya turned away, walked swiftly to the door. When the bell chimed behind her one last time, her heart felt like stone. She didn't cry, not yet. But when she reached home, she collapsed on the living room floor, the pain breaking through like a dam. She didn't know if she had just lost real love or a beautiful illusion, only that something inside her had shattered, and it would take a long time to heal. Maya didn't know whether she had walked away from real love or just a beautiful illusion. But one thing was certain, she had left. And sometimes, once you walk away, there's no way back. Time passed slowly after Maya left Julian. She returned to her routines at the Ink and Steam, burying herself in book orders and cappuccinos for loyal customers. But there were gaps that work couldn't fill. The empty table by the window, the espresso no one ordered, the glance she gave the door every time it opened. She didn't reach out, and he didn't call. Weeks passed like colorless dreams. She existed more than lived. But one late afternoon in early spring, as Maya was wiping down the counter, the door opened, and he was there. No flowers, no grand gestures. Julian simply stood there, his eyes quieter, carrying something different. "Maya," he said, his voice rougher. "I'm sorry." She stared at him for a long time. There was no accusation in her eyes, only waiting. Julian stepped closer and pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. "Everything binding us before, the paperwork, the conditions, the clauses, I've erased them all." Maya blinked. "Why?" "Because I don't want you to think you're bound to me by anything," Julian replied, earnest. "I was wrong to think affection could grow from control. What I want isn't a child or a relationship on paper. I want you. Only if you choose me." She sat down, her hand trembling slightly. "Why the change?" Julian paused. "Because when you left, I realized, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel whole without someone. Not because she gave me peace, but because she made me want to become someone better." Maya looked at him, and for the first time she saw real hurt in Julian's eyes. No armor, no act. "I don't know if I can come back," she whispered. "I don't know if I trust enough to try again." Julian nodded. "I'm not asking for a decision today. I just want you to know I'm here, not as the man who offered a contract, but as a man who's willing to wait." The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was full of hope, fragile but real. A week after seeing Julian again, Maya went to the clinic for a routine checkup. She didn't expect much, just a precaution after weeks of stress, but when the doctor called her in and pressed the cold gel and scanner to her abdomen, Maya instinctively held her breath. On the tiny screen, a small flicker appeared, blurry, barely there, but unmistakable. "Congratulations," the doctor smiled. "You're about 6 weeks pregnant." Maya said nothing for several seconds. Her ears buzzed. She stared at the screen, at that trembling image, a life forming inside her. Not because of a contract, not because of an arrangement, but because of something real, however fragile it had once been. When she stepped out of the clinic, spring wind brushed her cheeks. Maya paused on the sidewalk, hand gently resting on her stomach, where a second heartbeat had begun. She walked in silence, letting the news settle inside her like morning fog. That afternoon, she wandered the old streets of her neighborhood, past the little bookshop where she had bought her first novel. She touched familiar corners, as if to confirm this world was still real, not just something imagined. That evening, In her small kitchen, Maya brewed a cup of tea. Then she sat at the table, picked up her phone, and scrolled to the name. Julian Carter. She typed a simple message. I have something to tell you, not because of any contract, just because it's true. She paused, then hit send. And within her, for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a gentle certainty. Hope and life were growing inside her. Maya's message was sent at 9 p.m. She didn't expect an immediate reply, nor did she know how Julian would react, but less than 10 minutes later, her phone vibrated. A short message appeared. I'm on my way. Rain had begun to fall outside, early spring droplets tapping against the roof, soft and steady. Maya didn't change, didn't put on makeup. She simply sat in the living room, hand resting on her stomach, where life had quietly begun. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Julian standing there, hair wet, coat soaked, but his gaze clear. No panic, no confusion, only a quiet, focused intent. May I come in? He asked, voice raspy from the cold. Maya nodded and stepped aside. Julian entered and stood in silence for a moment, as though unsure how to begin. You said you had something to tell me, he finally said. Maya nodded again, then walked to the table. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded ultrasound image, placing it gently on the surface between them. Julian looked at the paper. Then he looked at her. His eyes didn't waver, not calculating, not analyzing, just quiet. Is this real? He asked, almost whispering. It seems so, Maya said softly. I don't know what to think yet. I just know. It's here. Julian took a step forward, then paused. I didn't wish for this to happen because of a contract. But now that it has, if there's even the slightest chance to start over, this time with choice, with truth, then I want to be here, for both of you. Maya didn't respond right away. Her eyes held no tears now, only a deep weariness slowly giving way to something else, something like the beginning of trust. I don't need grand promises, she said quietly, just someone who won't walk away when things get hard. Julian stepped closer. I won't walk away. I won't forgive you if you hurt this child, Maya whispered. I know, Julian replied, but I also hope you'll believe me when I say, for the first time, I'm not thinking just about myself. Maya studied him for a long moment. Then she reached out, not for comfort, not for closeness, but as permission. Julian took her hand. His was warm, even though his clothes were still wet. And in that moment, all conditions, all wounds, all doubts seemed to dissolve beneath the sound of rain tapping gently against the window. They said nothing more. They just stood there hand in hand, not at the end, but at a beginning. And this time, there was no contract to bind them, only a small life growing quietly and a silent promise made in the rain. Time passed, and the ink and steam once again filled with laughter, coffee, and the warmth of worn pages. Maya stood behind the counter, one hand resting gently on her growing belly. Julian sat at the window table, his gaze soft and quiet. They no longer needed grand declarations, only presence and a future built on honest choice.